Starting the shiur on Hilchas Gitin, Siman Kuf Chafal from Sif Gimel, the dinim of Itim Chalim, Itim שוטה. Someone who is sometimes normal and sometimes nuts. The Beis Yosef brings the tshuva of the Rashba, which is in Chelik Aleph Siman Tafshin Samach Hey, and it's a kitzur from the Rashba Chelik Dal Siman Reish Aleph, that the Rashba was asked about the Gemara Maseches Rosh Hashanah of Chav Ches Amud Aleph. Over there, Rava says, yeah, that's how the Rashba says. It's Rava says. It's a memra of Rava. However, if you look in our Gemara, it's Vatanya, which means that it's a Braisa. Itim Chalim, Itim שוטה, someone who is sometimes normal, sometimes healthy, sometimes a שוטה. Kashehu Chalim, Hareu Kepikech L'chol Dvarav. When he's healthy, he's like a Pikech for everything. Kashehu שוטה, Hareu Kshoita L'chol Dvarav. When he's a שוטה, he's like a שוטה for everything. The Rashba was asked whether this halacha is halacha we paskin like Rava, that we paskin like Rava that the get that the itim chalim itim שוטה, when he's a chalim is a pikech l'chol dvarav, and therefore his get is a get, or we do not paskin like Rava. The one who asked the question to the Rashba seemed to understand that Rabbi Yochanan that we discussed in the last shiur. Rabbi Yochanan holds that Achzei Kurdaikos, you have to wait until he recovers. That when Achzei Kurdaikos, you have to wait until he recovers. So he thought maybe Rabbi Yochanan and Rava contradict each other. Because if by Achzei Kurdaikos you have to wait till the person recovers, so therefore by Itim Chalim Itim שוטה you're supposed to wait until you know the person is fully healed, not that you know he's going to go back to being a שוטה. And the Rashba responded, first of all, Allah Chazek Rava. And even if you're going to say that according to Rava, it's also that the halacha, that Rava disagrees on Rabbi Yochanan, still halacha like Rava because he's Basraisa. He's after Rabbi Yochanan, and therefore the halacha is like him. But anyways, the Rashba explains the halacha is like Rava, and Rava does not disagree with Rabbi Yochanan. And he brings, the Rashba says that that's what the Rambam paskins, that's Rabbi Nuhai paskins, and the Rashba says that even if the person does not return fully to being healthy, but he already talks like a regular person, he's just weak, so then he's considered a pikeach for this time, and the get is considered a get, and you do not need bdike like by a nishtatek. By a nishtatek you need bdike, but by a itim chalim itim שוטה, when he's chalim you do not need bdike. And that's what the Mechaber writes in Sif Gimel. The Beis Yosef also sends you to look at what he wrote in Siman Kuf Yutes, and the Mechaber over here writes the same thing as the Rashba, and the Ramah sends you to look at Siman Kuf Yutes. Siman Kuf Yutes Vav. What is the Siman Kuf Yutes Vav? The Torah writes a nishtates. What does nishtates mean? She does not know how to watch herself. She does not know how to keep herself from znus. Yeah, the husband is not allowed to divorce her, even if she knows how to keep her get. Why? Because Takanas Chachamim that the people should not be noyeg minhag hefker by her, that they're going to think since she's not fully capacitated and she's a grusha, so she's going to be manipulated into znus. But he's allowed to marry another woman. The Chem that Rabbeinu Gershon doesn't apply. And then there's a whole discussion in the Torah what obligations he has towards this woman. If he's machlekes hapoiskim, if he's chayav in ksus, in refuah, in food, and all these things. The Beis Yosef over there brings the Gemara Maseches Yevamis Kufit Gimel Amud Beis that midiraisa you can be megarish this woman bal karcha even when she's a שוטה. Only Takanas Chachamim not to be megarish her. And that is when is midiraisa, she's megureshes, when she knows yudas lishmer gita, when she knows how to protect, how to watch her own get. And the only thing that she doesn't know is how to protect herself. And then Chachamim said, don't give a get to her because there's going to be minhag hefker with her. But if she does not know how to keep her get, then she's not megureshes even midiraisa. And the reason is, the Gemara says two reasons. Either because it says v'shilcha mi beiso, she has to be sent from his house. But this woman who does not know how to keep her get, does not understand what a get is, meshalcha v'chayzeres, that's what Rabbi Shmuel says. Or the pasuk says v'nasam biyada. This woman who has a yad, she's able to accept. Mikoyach yad, she's able to accept a get. And this one, the shait, is not able to accept it if she does not know how to keep her get. The Beis Yosef continues that he found what the Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishantz says, that the itim chalim, itim sheita, if she received the get while she's healthy, and she understood very well what the get is all about, she is not megureshes. Why? Because Takanas Chachamim still applies, because since she's itim chalim, itim sheita, when she's going to be a sheita, she's not going to be able to watch herself properly. And no, she's not going to be able to watch her get. And therefore, you cannot get the get, is not going to be kosher. But if there is a kvius, if she has a veses, that's the loshon that he uses, there's a veses for itim chalim, itim sheita, that we know when she's chalim and we know when she's sheita, that's when it's a problem. Because then you know for sure that she's going to go nuts, and you know for sure there's going to be a time when she's not going to be able to lishmer gita, when she's not going to be able to lishmer esatzma. But if it's only, the Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishan says, but if it's only bakroi, if it only happened once or twice or three times, but it wasn't once or twice, but it wasn't a regular occurrence, that she went nuts and she got better, then she is megureshes. The Mari Veil writes that you have, this all brought in the Beis Yosef, that you have to be machmer like the Reb Shimshon Mishantz. But Rabbeinu Tam and the Rosh hold that you could be megaresh her when she is healthy, even though she's going to end up at some point becoming a shaita. The Ramah and Darkei Moshe points out that's not only the Rosh and Rabbeinu Tam, it's also the Mordechai. Trumas Hadeshen takes a little bit of a different approach. And he says in Psakim Siman Reish Tezvav that if it was done, I mean, he doesn't say to do it, it says if it was done, because the Chacham felt, understood, or knew that he thought that she's going to remain normal, and afterwards it was Nesbarer that she goes nuts again, then the get works. That's the Darkei Moshe.
Everyone would agree with that.
Huh?
Everyone would agree with that.
The what?
If they thought saying, oh,
Not the Mari Veil doesn't hold like that. The Mari Veil says if you know that she's going to go nuts again, she has Zmanim Kvuim. So it happens to be the Chacham thought that even though she has Zmanim Kvuim, things are going to change. That's what the Bach says. The Bach says L'kuli alma b'diavad it works. Not everybody holds a b'diavad this way. The Bach says the way the Bach understands L'kuli alma, the Bach of the Sifkot Nazayin, that L'kuli alma it works. And the Bach says La'aloch is a reason to be mekel. Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber and Siman Kufites Bechlal doesn't mention the din of itim chalim, itim sheita. He only mentions it in Beis Yosef. The Ramah brings the Trumas Hadeshen, and that if it was done and they thought that she's going to stay better, then it works. And it seems like it implies that it's only a b'diavad situation. The Chalkas Mechoykek Sifkot and Tezvav over there in Kuf Yutes says that the Marshal held that even b'diavad it's asur. The same Marshal is also brought by the Bach, and he says that the Marshal was machmer too much. Apostle, yeah, doesn't you shouldn't the get doesn't work. The Pri Chadash also in Siman Kuf Yutes is medayik from the lashon of the Ramah that if he says is medayik from the lashon of the Ramah fakert, if the woman, if the Rava Mesader does not think that she's going to remain normal, then the get is a problem. So he takes the other way. He says, since the Ramah says that if the Rav Mesader would the name of Trumas Hadeshin. If the Rav Mesader knows that she's going to remain normal, thought she's going to remain normal, then the get is fine. So obviously means if the Rav Mesader gave a get and he thought that she's not going to remain normal, he wasn't sure, he decided she's not going to remain normal, then the get is not good. And the Pri Chodesh also says the Marashal exaggerated too much in being machmir on it, and he says with pashtas you have to be mekel. The Taz, yeah, they're against the Rasha.
He said that if the Rav knew that she won't be normal,
it's not a get, but the Marashal says b'diavad it's always, even b'diavad, the itim cholim itim sheit is not good. The Taz is the first one who brings a great diuk from the Shimshon Shantz. Over there, that uses the Beis Yosef, that uses the lashon of vesas, and he says the reason for using the lashon vesas is intentional, to connect it to Hilchas Nida. Just like in Hilchas Nida, to be able to be kaveya vesas, it has to be 3 times that it happens with specific intervals and specific the same exact intervals. Same too over here. To be able to have a woman that's itim chalim itim sheita, which is problematic, has to be the exact same time repeating itself. And if it's not so, she's becheskas bria, even if she went nuts and got healthy 3 times, as long as it wasn't exactly the same, repeating in exactly the same amount of time. And he says that this is what the Trumas Hadeshin also held. That's the real intention of the Trumas Hadeshin. That when they said Nira Lohem, what was the idea of Nira Lohem? The idea was that the Chachamim really were supposed to wait. The Chachamim that made the get were really supposed to wait and see if she's going to become healthy or not based on the vesas. Yeah, they wanted to see if it's going to pass. If the oina is going to pass without any chashash. And they didn't wait because they thought it's going to be fine. So then it's kosher b'diavad. But if they were mevarer that she does not have such a vesas, it was 3 times, but it was not nikba, then even the chatchila you're allowed to be matir. Because ultimately the Taz ends, it's only a chumra de rabbanon, it's only takonas chachamim on this. That is in short a summary of Siman Kuf Yites that Amos sends you to look over there. Go back to Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph, which we were discussing now, because we're discussing about a man being megaresh, not a woman being misgareshes when it comes to being itim chalim itim sheita. The Beis Shmuel says in Sifkot and Dalet that when you know the time that this person is healthy, you dua, then you don't have to wait to see what's going on, and he could be megaresh right away. Why? Because by a woman we're machmir mitzat chashash znus, but by a man we're not machmir mitzat chashash znus. There's no chashash znus by a man, so therefore you don't have to wait and figure out maybe she's going to be itim sheita again. If you know for a fact that this guy's itim chalim itim sheita, you know that this time he's chalim, he's allowed to be megaresh at this time because he's kepikeach l'chol dvarav, and that's the same thing as the chalkas mechagis sifkat megimel. And the Chalkas Mechagik adds more. He says, even if we know that he's going to go nuts again, itim chalim, itim sheita, now he's for sure chalim, therefore sipikech l'chol dvarav and the get is fine, and we know he's going to go crazy again, still the get is kosher. He's allowed to give a get right away. Why? Ma'alono shiach zelushtus. What do we care if he's going to go nuts again? At the end of the day, there's no shayla of chashash znus. And the Pri Chodesh points out something which would come up in Poskim in this situation, and there's a Tzemach Tzedek which discusses, we're not going to go into it today, that if this person was totally normal when he married her, and now he's itim chalim itim sheita, still he's allowed to chatchila give a get when he's itim chalim. Even though sometimes if a person was chalim, was completely healthy when he got married, and then he became a sheita, but maybe not a full sheita, it becomes a whole discussion in Poskim, if he could be megaresh, because maybe if it was a sheita when he got married, and a sheita when he gives a get, so the same koyach, one way or the other, partial sheita. But if it was fully healthy, and then he went nuts, lav dafka that he could be megarish. The Pri Choshen says no, being that itim chalim, itim sheitas kepikech l'chol dvar over the time of chalim, therefore even though he was healthy fully healthy when he got married, the fact that right now when he's itim chalim is considered like a pikech and he could give a get at that point. To get pashut, in Sifkot Yud Beis, brings what the Levush writes on this Sif. The Levush adds to the Mechaber, and the Levush writes v'yashayimrim that Safek Shaitahu regarding itim chalim itim shaita. It doesn't say it's a shaita, it's possible. It says yashayimrim that itim chalim itim shaita is a Safek shaita. Why? She'ein anu yoidim beviru zman briusi, because we don't know for sure the time when he's going to be healthy. And therefore, yashayimrim is a Safek shaita, which means that he's not megarish. He cannot be megarish because we don't know for sure when it's going to be. So that first of all, if you look like the Chalkas Mechagik and the Beis Shmuel, you don't have the problem because they say Yodua. If it's Yodua, if you know the time when he's normal, then it's good to go. But even that, the Get Pashut comes and says he doesn't understand who is he referring to. He says maybe it's the Rambam. He says maybe it's really Rabbeinu Yerucham. The Rabbeinu Yerucham that the Beis Yosef brings in Simon Memdal at Sifchaf in the name of the Rameh, that if you don't know what time he's going to be a shaita, then he's considered a suffix. Which implies that if you do know, it's fine. So therefore, the way the Get Pasha understands is if you want to use the chumrah of the Yashayim is the suffix shaita, it's only when you don't know when he's going to lose his mind. But if you know when he's going to lose his mind, because he's itim chalam itim shaita, and you know the time, then the get is fine. And the Get Pashat also adds over there in Sifkot Yud Gimel that you do not need a bdika for itim chalim itim shaita. When he's chalim, he does not need a bdika, not like a nishtatek. The Beis Shmuel that we mentioned says that a get is good when you dua, when you know when he is healthy. We know the time is going to be healthy. The Pischei Tshuva over here brings a Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer Yeridei Siman Zayin. They're going to ask me why is and we're going to also discuss it Tzemach Tzedek also in Yeridei. So you're asking why are we looking at Yeridei? Because one of the main places where Dinei Shaita are being discussed, aside for Hilchas Gitin, it's discussed in Choshen Mishpat regarding sales, and it's discussed in Hilchas Shchita. And in Hilchas Shchita, the discussion about itim chalim itim shaita. Therefore, the question of itim chalim itim shaita was common also when it came to dinei shchitas. The Chasam Sofer is in the Yeridei Siman Zayin, and over there he discusses this knowing the time, not knowing the time. You know when he's nuts, you don't know when he's nuts, and he starts discussing regarding a get over there. That's the Pischei Tshuva brings. It brings the Chasam Sofer, and over there the Chasam Sofer says that if you don't know exactly what time he's going to, when his time for being body is, then it's not a get. If the get was sent by a shliach, it's not a kosher get. Why? Because you don't know specifically how many hours, how many days, how many weeks, or how many months he has normal between episodes. So therefore, if the shliach is going to bring a get, how is he going to know that the meshaleach, that the baal is still normal? Because if a person was mitziv lichtiv get when he was normal, and then he went meshugi, you have to wait till he recovers again. And the Chasam Sofer obviously understands the same thing applies to shlichus, not like the Ktsos. It happens to be that the Tzemach Tzedek in Chidush and Maseches Yevamos also holds like this, not like the Ktsos, that also the shliach has to know for sure. Not only for ksiva, but also for shlichus, you have to make sure that the time when the shliach gives the get, you have to make sure that the person is that the baal is chalim. So therefore, if it's a get alidei shlichus and the person is itim chalim itim shaita, it only works if you know the time, how many hours you have left till he loses it. But if he gives it miyad liyad, you don't have to know the time. You don't have to know exactly, because right now you see the Bezdin sees that he's a pekeach. The Bezdin sees that he's doing it right, so therefore you don't have to worry about it. Pischei Tshuva asks a question on the Chasam Sofer. This doesn't make sense what the Chasam Sofer is saying. Why? Because the Beis Shmuel who says that Yodua is based on Rabbeinu Yerucham, And for Rabbeinu Yerucham, it's mashma that the suffix, when you don't know ein yodua, it's a suffix even if you do check the husband. Even if you do the bdikas, it still doesn't remove the suffix when it's not yodua at the time that he's going to lose it. Why? Because we're chayshish that he's starting to be nishtata, to lose it right after the bdika. So he got checked at 1 p.m. You don't know what time he's going to start losing it. So it could be by 1:15 p.m. he's starting to become a shaita, and he's no longer normal. And then you're going to be giving the get that you have a problem. It's not shaykh that if you're going to do a bdika at 1 p.m. and you're going to be writing the get, you're going to finish it by 2 p.m. Till you're going to give it by 2:15 p.m. That the bdika that was done an hour and a half ago should still work until now. Could be you become nishtata between the bdika and now. And when you don't have a zman kavua, so the bdika doesn't help because you can't constantly be boidik him. Every 60 seconds you're going to ask him, does a watermelon grow in the winter? It's not going to work. Or today it's not going to work anyways, these kinds of bdikas, because most people have no idea what time, which seasons the fruits grow. Even though there's an easy simon for it, if it's on sale, you know it's a season. If it's not on sale, you know it came imported. But it's a bdikas, today I have to think of different bdikas. Also, you can't even ask them what season it is because it changes. And even when it's winter, it could be warm, and in summer, it could be cold. So these simanim today is a little bit different. These bdikas, you still have to do bdikas. I'm saying the bdika is not going to help. You can't ask a bdika every 60 seconds. So you're choishish and nishtata. So therefore, the Pischat Shuvah says, based on Rabbeinu Yerucham, this that the Chasam Sofer says that you can give the get miyad liyad, it's not going to work. It doesn't help. So he says, he leaves it as a question. He says, but I looked in the Shas Tshuvas Maram Brisk, Siman Lamed. The Maram Brisk went at length at the Beis Shmuel, and the Maram Brisk holds that be'emes it's not clear that according to Rabbeinu Yerucham a bdika is not going to help. Why? Because over here we have a chazakah. When did you have to be? I think we discussed it last year in Hilchos Eruvin, that you have to, the bdika is when you have, chiyuv bdika is only when you have a chazakah. That when you don't have a chazakah. When you have a chazakah, you have a roiv and you have a chazakah, so yes, there's no chiyuv bdika, it's good to do bdika because efshar levarer. But you don't have to do a bdika. So over here, the vast majority of the people, at least what the Maram Brisk says, is the vast majority of the world are not shaitim. And so there's a chazaka. This person you can't take him out of the roiv and out of the chazaka and say there's a chiyuv bdika. Right now he looks normal. He looks like the rest of the people, so it's fine. And therefore the Maram Brisk calls it a bdika does help. Even according to Rabbeinu Yerucham, a bdika does help for a shaita that you don't know she'ein yodua. The yodua, if it's yodua, you don't need bdika because you know that this and this day on the calendar is going to lose it. But if you don't know, then the bdika does help. That's what Maram Brisk says. This is especially since the Rambam Bechlal hold and the Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishan's Bechlal hold that you don't need bdika when he's chalim. So only according to Rabbeinu Yerucham, that's mashma. You do that by ein yodua, you don't need you have a problem. For them, for sure, bdika is going to help. And the Maram Brisk is another tshuva that the Pischat Shuvah brings over there. If it's b'mokim igun. Then it's enough to just do a bdika before he starts being metzaveh to write and give the get. And even if there wasn't a full-fledged halachic bdika, the questions to ascertain that he is, especially because today, day and age, the gitin are done already the way according to Seder HaGet, there's a whole list of questions. It takes 10-15 minutes before the get starts. And therefore, if the guy is able to answer everything straight and understands what's flying, then you know that he's still normal. It's considered like a bdika. That's the aside of the Maram Brisk. Today, all the shilas you're going to ask him before, say that I get, that's already counts like a bdika. Even if you don't ask him what season peach is growing. And he says bifrat because today, because there's some people that hold you need all the simanim shaitu of Gemara, etc., but that doesn't go into it. And he concludes, the Pischat Shuvah concludes, bringing the Chasam Sofer, that when you do the bdika, you have to wait. When it's given, you have to do the bdika, and you have to check until a half hour after the get was given. It gives a time of a half hour, time frame. That's how long you have to give, miyad liyad, after the get is given, to see that he continues being normal. So that way you know that he didn't start losing it before. Because if 5 minutes after the get he's completely he's completely nuts, then you have a chashash. Maybe he started losing it 15 minutes beforehand. But if you have a half-hour time frame that he remains fine, then you know that that even if he lost it, it only started, the episode only started after the get was completed.
First you have to check to see how long it takes him to become crazy. And you have to check now to make sure he's not crazy.
What do you mean you have to check? If we're talking about somebody you don't know. If he doesn't have a vessus, if you don't know when he loses it and when he doesn't. If you know when he loses it, then for sure it's not a problem. Because right now it's a b'kehel chol davar, except according to the Marshal. The Aruch HaShulchan goes at length in summarizing the different nekudas that are applicable in the dinim of Itim Chalim Itim Sheitam. I'm just going to go through. It's in Sifkat and Yud Aleph Beis Gimel in Aruch HaShulchan. And I'm going to go. There's 6 points from the Aruch HaShulchan I want to present. Each one of them is an important halacha. First one. This is in Sifkat and Yud. When the Shulchan Aruch says that even if somebody, the end of the Shulchan Aruch, there brings to the Rashba, even if the person is still weak, he's not fully recovered, it's still, he could still give a get when he's a pikeach, when he's chalim. It's only if the person was ill with the illness that we know that when you recover, you fully recover. When you're normal, you're fully normal. Or whatever the definition of normal is. It's the difference between nuts and normal. If it's you're acting crazy, how much time of the day. But the difference between crazy, it's considered normal, is if you know that this illness, when he's chalim, he's fine. So now you see that he's pashat weak begashmius, it doesn't mean that he's ois chalim. But if the illness is not that one, it's an illness that it takes time till he recovers and goes back to being normal. So if he's chalash, if he's weak, begufoi, so then you can't just go ahead and say, well, the mechaber says that you could give it. You have to wait till he's fully a pikeach. It means only if you know that the chalishus is not affecting on the fact that he's a pikeach, and therefore you have to be choiker heitav. That's he says in Sif Yud. In Sif Yud Aleph it says if he doesn't have his man kavua, if it's not yodua what time he goes nuts. So if the Bezdin did not do proper bdikas, they weren't medaktik, then you should not be machshir the get based on the umdana that they probably checked. Which is like, last year I mentioned Tzemach Tzedek says that you could rely on the Bezdin that they probably did it right. But he says that Shulchan takes is a little bit more extreme, that if you don't know that they did it right, you can't just say umdana when the person is itim chalim itim sheita. That's the second point in Sif Yud Aleph. Also in Sif Yud Aleph, a third point, if what we mentioned in Shulchan Aruch, that the person, if he's weak, what I mentioned before, that if he's weak, he could give a get, it only applies if he's mana yodua. If you know, yodua is mana, if you know the time when he's normal, when he's nuts. If you don't know what time he's normal and what time he's nuts, you can't be machshir the get if he's half weak. You have to make sure that he's fully recovered. And no, the first one is that the first one is when you should write. We're talking about after it's written. Could you be machshir get lacher ma'isa? Because in Sif Yud Aleph he's talking about after a get was done. Sif Yud is talking about before a get was done. And again he repeats over here that so therefore tzarichim medakdik yafe when there's a get of somebody, you receive a get of somebody that was itim chalam itim sheita and he ein zmane kavua, you have to be medakdik very carefully about it. That's the fourth point. The fifth point is already in Sif Yud Beis. If he is completely healthy now, whether zmane kavua or ein zmane kavua, if you see him completely healthy, he's not weak or anything like that, he could be megadash right away. And it's not like what it says in Siman Kuf Yutes regarding a woman who's a sheita, because over there, the reason why we're choishesh is mitzat takonas chazal that yinagu b'minag hefker. Over here, you don't have that chashash. And even there, but the evidence is good. If he's megadash, in the case of l'chatchil, you shouldn't have been megadash. And Sifkat Yud Gimel, he mentions about people who are depressed, that you have to look the Bezdin has to be mischashav clearly, because some people, if they're sometimes they are depressed, sometimes they're not. The Bezdin should be mischashav clearly to find out what the situation is. The Shalos Teshuvos machshavo is be'etza. Even Ezer Siman Beis brings an interesting patent to deal with the itim chalim itim שוטה. He says like this: if the Bezdin feels, according to they feel that he's fine, he's roy, the checks, and it looks like he's healthy, but the Rav HaMesader still there's a nagging doubt in him that maybe this guy is not yet fully recovered, but he can't pinpoint what's bothering him about it. So then he says, the Svar of the Noda B'Yehuda, which we mentioned, which the Tzemach Tzedek completely took apart, we mentioned it in last year, that by a shayt, if it's Emed al Gab of the get is kosher, he said, at least over here, you could add that. You could add that Svar. How do you do it? Right, I'll explain to you. The Noda B'Yehuda says that a shayt, if it's a Godel Emed al Gabov, and you understand, so then the get might be a get b'shas adchak. And a lot of poskim had a hard time understanding it. The Tzemach Tzedek says that bichlal not to rely on it. But over here, this machshavos be'etza uses Noda B'Yehuda for the following idea how to deal with the itim chalim, itim שוטה, that you know he's a pikeach, but you have a doubt. You have a shtickle doubt about it. He says, let him appoint, and the get should be written the way you're supposed to write it normally. The sefer is going to write the get, the husband is going to give it to the wife, everything is good. Why? Because that's what you do. Afterwards, put that get in front of the husband and tell him to copy it word for word onto a new get. He should write the get b'chsav yodai. If he's able to write a get b'chsav yodai with a godel oimed al gabav, then that counts as a bdika, that covers the Noda B'Yehuda, covers everything else, and then he'll give it to her. I just want to point out there are some Rishonim which hold, we'll go to the next topic, there are some Rishonim which hold that itim chalim, itim שוטה doesn't apply, that you don't know how to do the bdikas properly today. I'm talking about the Rishonim, some Rishonim wrote that we're not baki in the bdikas, and therefore it's a problem. That's the mashmos of the Marshal, because we're not baki in the bdikas. The Achronim, I'm sorry. But by the Maisa we do the bdikas. You look at the Divrei Chaim, Even Ezer Chelakav Siman on Beis. Over there he says you could rely on bdikas, you do the bdika and it's all good. And Shas Shus Be'er Moshe to Yerushalimski and Kuntres Bin Yerushalayim Simin Yitchesa is Daled. He adds another interesting point that's important to know, that if a person was normal and he became a שוטה and now he recovered, but he didn't fully recover. He's itim chalim, itim שוטה, and the itim chalim part is not full recovery. He didn't go back to being normal like he used to be. But he's normal enough that he's not a שוטה l'inyan get. That's already enough. You don't need, when you say itim chalim, itim שוטה, it doesn't mean that the itim chalim has to be back to the perfect capacity that he was before he was a שוטה. It means itim chalim, that he's a chalim enough that he's no longer a שוטה al pi halacha. That's what the Be'er Moshe says. You don't have to go to an extreme that for a person to be considered chalim is to be fully recovered. It's not that he recovers to such a point that he could say agoimo. It means that he recovered enough that he's no longer a שוטה according to a Gemara. Now I'm going to move into Hilchos Shchita, because the letter of the Rebbe that I mentioned to you last time, that where we mentioned the Rebbe writes a bunch of comments. One of the comments over there, the Rebbe says, the response to the person who asked why the Simla Chadasha, the Tvuas Shir, was not mentioned. And the Rebbe says the Tvuas Shir was not mentioned because Tvuas Shir was exaggerating. So now we're going to just discuss, that's one line from the Rebbe, we're going to go into the Tvuas Shir and the Alter Rebbe and what the Rebbe writes. Tzemach Tzedek, yeah. And from there we're going to move on to the Tzemach Tzedek, and where he discusses itim chalim, itim שוטה regarding a sheichet. And over there he goes into a whole discussion on the Begder of this itim chalim, itim שוטה, and sfeikus, and the taz, about the veses. Simla Chadasha, Siman Aleph, Sa'if Chav Tes. Over there, after Sif Chav Ches, he writes, he says that the שוטה, simon of a שוטה, specifically if you do the 4 simon of the Gemara, and bederech shtus, if he did one of the simanim of the Gemara b'derech shtus, and then in Siman Chavtes, Sif Chavtes, and Siman Aleph, the Siman Chadasha says, but the simanim of the Gemara love dafka those simanim. It goes like the Rambam. It could be any siman shtus that he does, but derech shtus is already makes him anything that he does, but derech shibush v'tiruf hadas is already considered a sheita, and as long as he did not recover and go back to being a pikeach. And he says that another point that he says that all the chumras that we have regarding an aid, and Hilchas Eidos and Siman Lamed Hey, about an aid if he's a sheiter or not, the same thing, all that applies also to shchita. And the chayra would also apply to a get. Now, in Tvuas Shor, Sifkot and Memvav, there's two Sifkotans that are relevant to this. Tvuas Shor is a biur on the Simla Chadasha. Sifkot and Memvav, he says, he quotes from Cheshem Mishpat Siman Lamed Hey regarding Hilchas Eidos. Over there it says that if somebody does something only one time, he's not considered a sheita. Then he brings the book Rosh Yosef that disagrees that even if you do something derech shtus one time, is already considered a sheita. You don't need the chazaka 3 times. It's enough that one time he does something crazy, and that's already proves that he's a sheita. And the Tvuas Shor says that he looked and couldn't find not a poisek kadwain and not a poisek basra that says that you need a chazaka to be machzik somebody 3 times to be considered a regular sheita. And he says that when the Beis Yosef in Hilchis over here quoted the lashon of the Rambam, that a sheita, which is spoken last year, this is be'etzim, it's partially hemshech to last year, that when a sheita is somebody who's daite meshubeshes tamid, somebody who's always nuts, the Rambam doesn't mean to say that the siman of a sheita means that he's always acting nuts. No, it could even be once. It just means that the Rambam wants to tell you meshubeshes tamid means that he's not an itim chalim, itim sheita, that you know when he's fine and when he's not. Because itim chalim, itim sheita, when he's fine, he's considered a pekech. But somebody who did it once, you don't know. You have no idea. And you don't need a chazak of 3 times. And as long as you don't have a proof that he changed, he's considered a sheita. That's in Sifkot and Memvav. Sifkot and Aleph, he goes and he discusses the Teisus and Chagigah, where the Teisus and Chagigah said, we mashma for Teisus and Chagigah, that can't be that somebody would be a sheita for one thing and normal for everything else. So if a person is a sheita for one thing, he's a sheita for everything else. And he twists the smeh and Hilchas Eidos to fit into that narrative. That's a summary of the Tvuas Shor. Yeah, in short, you don't need all the simanim. Any kind of derech shtus is derech shtus. When the Rambam says tamid, it doesn't mean that he's the whole time acting crazy. You don't need the chazak of 3 times. It could even be once. It's only to exclude itim chalam, itim sheita. If a person is normal in everything and not normal in one thing, he's still considered a sheita. And he basically twists the Rambam to fit into it and twists the Smet to fit into this, to broaden the definition, the halachic definition of a sheita, which then puts a big strain on how to determine who is a sheita. And more importantly, how to determine that somebody recovered. Because if at one time you could become nuts, how do you know if somebody recovered? How's chazal lebrius? You don't know. The Alter Rebbe in Siman Chaf Hey, in the Chuvas, discusses a woman, the halachas in Siman Kuf Yutes.
Are you going to get back to the letter?
Yeah, it comes after the Alter Rebbe, because the Rebbe says what the Alter Rebbe says, quotes the Alter Rebbe in a few words of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe in Siman Chaf Hey discusses a woman who is a sheita, and the Alter Rebbe says he's responding to somebody who asked him the question, to a Rav in a city. And he says over there, the Rav was medaktik from the Lashon HaRambam, the sheita is daite meturefes tamid, and when the Rambam says tamid, it's dafke tamid, not a one-time thing. And Alter Rebbe says it's good that you were medaktik in the Rambam tamid, and not like the Tvuas Shor in Sifkot and Memvav. And the Alter Rebbe says, and even though the rayas that the Tvuas Shor brings from Rosh Yosef and from Teisus and Chagigah are good rayas, still in all, what the Rambam says that he's machmir in a certain place is only l'inyan edus. The fact there's a specific din regarding edus, like the Marit says. And that's when we are machmir regarding a שוטה, that he's considered a שוטה for one thing. And that's when we say that you can't be a שוטה only for one thing. But that שוטה that we're talking about in Hilchas Eidos, that's the שוטה that the שוטה was relying on to create this narrative that the שוטים are, that even one-time שוטה is a problematic, etc., or שוטה l'davar echad. That שוטה is only referring to Hilchas Eidos, a special din in Hilchas Eidos. It's not the שוטה that Chazal is talking about everywhere else. It's a special din in Hilchas Eidos. There's a שוטה for Hilchas Eidos. Just like we learned in Tzemach Tzedek, there's a שוטה for Hilchas Choshen Mishpat.
The Rambam or that even one?
The Maharit explains, not the even one time. That's only, or a שוטה l'davar, they can't be a שוטה l'davar echad. It could be that if you're שוטה l'davar echad, you're שוטה for everything. That's only regarding Hilchas Eidos. And he continues, and the Alter Rebbe continues, says that's regarding what the Tvua Shur says in Sifkat Nun Vav. The Tvua Shur says in Sifkat Nun Aleph that according to the Rambam, if you're שוטה b'davar echad, you're שוטה for everything. You can't be partial שוטה. He says the Lashon of Alter Rebbe on the Tvua Shur is a Tvua Shur sham nitchak me'oid b'ma shekosav harambam v'ze einoi b'mashma Lashon harambam klal. So the Tvua Shur twisted the Rambam to fit into it. And if you read the Rambam, it's not what the Rambam means. The Rambam is only talking about the Eidos, and therefore you cannot use that Rambam, that there can't be a שוטה for davar echad, not everything else to that. And to become a שוטה has to be a שוטה in everything. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says that in this specific case that was brought to him, and I'm summarizing a very long tshuva, that even though this woman is always crazy in certain things, she's nuts in certain things, if regarding the get, she talks properly, she understands it, and she has das lishmer gito, and she also has das lishmer es atzma, ein lochush klal, you have nothing to worry about. You have to worry about the fact that she's completely crazy in other specific things. And that's enough she should be able to receive a get. And he says that it's... if she understands the concept of a get, lishmer and lishmer gita, and she'll be able to lishmer es atzma. Lishmer gita, because otherwise it's not a get even with deraisa. And lishmer es atzma, because there shouldn't be the problem of takanas chachamim, that the issue of znus. And he says that he's still enough, that Rabbanim are still worried that maybe after they did the bdikas and everything to make sure that she's a bria, she's healthy, she's chaluma. Could be she's still, maybe one of the Rabbanim still has a chashash, maybe she's still a שוטה. He says, don't be machmir in it, because anyway, it's only a suffix the Rabbanon. And you could rely on the Taz, which is completely mekel, to rely on him for such a thing. And therefore, you shouldn't be machmir. You should give her the get at the time when she's healthy. And the Alter Rebbe continues, so you do your bdikas, you make sure that she is fine, and you move on. And that's when the Rebbe writes why, the Rebbe responds over there, this is one of the third ones, that asked why the Tvua Shur was not mentioned in Tzemach Tzedek. The Rebbe says, the respondent, he says, because the Alter Rebbe says that the Tvua Shur nitchak harbe berambam, and therefore, since the Alter Rebbe does not hold like the Tvua Shur, so the Tzemach Tzedek didn't bring him at all. Now let's move to the tshuva of the Tzemach Tzedek regarding itim chalim, itim שוטה. Yesod is the tshuva that's not in Choshen Mishpat and not in Even HaEzer. It's in Yerideya Siman Ches. It's 11 oisius in the tshuva of the Tzemach Tzedek regarding a sheichet which nishtata. And then he recovered. And the Alter Rebbe was machshir him and said that he could go back to being a sheichet. 10 years passed, he went nuts again. And then he recovered. Then, so they based on the Alter Rebbe before, the Alter Rebbe already passed away, they again were machshir him. Then it wasn't 10 years later. Then it was a year later, a few months later. The Kitzur 4 or 5 times throughout his lifetime as a sheichet, he lost it and recovered. The question right now was the Rabbanim was, could they rely on him or not? As a itim chalim, itim שוטה, could you put him back to his job as a sheichet Or do you have to start worrying, maybe he needs to have somebody watching over him the whole time, maybe he has to get checked. When does he have to get checked? Or maybe Bichlal is a Shayte, and therefore his Shchita is not good. And the Tzemach Tzedek first starts by saying, we know that you did the Bdika and he's a Pikeach now. Itim Chalim, let's say that he's a Itim Chalim, Itim Shayte. We don't know yet. Let's say he's a Itim Chalim, Itim Shayte. When he's Pikeach, Pikeach Chol Dvarav. So therefore, he should be kosher. And he brings a bunch of places where Itim Chalim, Itim Shayte, Be'ez Chalimusik, Pikeach Chol Dvarav. One of the places that he brings is Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph over here that we're learning now. And therefore, it's for sure that Shchita right now is kosher. He brings the Rashba that the Beis Yosef brings over here in Kuf Chaf Aleph. Also, that Be'ez Pikchusay, the halach is like Rava, or like the Braise, that Itim Chalim, Itim Shayte is Pikeach Chol Dvarav at the time when he is Chalim. And Taka, when he's going to lose it again, if he's going to lose it again, the Shchita will become possible from that moment onwards and not retroactively. Because when he's a Pikeach, he's a Pikeach Chol Dvarav. When he's a Chalim, he's a Pikeach Chol Dvarav. When he's Itim Shayte, he's a Shayte Chol Dvarav. But he says, well, we have a problem. The Tzemach Tzedek says, we have a din Cheshe Mishpat Siman Reish Lamed Hey. When somebody was Itim Chalim, Itim Shayte, or somebody became Nishtate after a sale of some sort, and the Eidim have to be Choyker, maybe the moment that he signed the contract of sale, he already started losing it. And the Eidim maybe thought he was normal, but he wasn't. He was already, the episode already started. And therefore, the Shulchan Aruch says to be medactic very carefully. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says, that the smell over there, Sifkat Nun Beis, and Siman Reish Lamed Hey, so you have to be medactic very well with it. And therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek says, maybe we have a shaila that in the middle of the Shchita is starting to lose it. One day, in a month from now, and 6 months from now, and 12 months from now, is going to be one day when he's going to start losing it in the middle of a Shchita. And even though you're not going to be able to see it right away, he's going to be already B'geder Shaitan, Shchitas Pasol, and you don't have people watching him the whole time. So Tzemach Tzedek says, no, when you're looking in Siman Reish Lamed Hey, it's not talking about someone who's Itim Shaitan. It's talking about someone who's Itim Nichpe. Nichpe is the one that he falls, and at that point he completely blanks out. And nichpe is a chayli, what's the translation nichpe? Epilepsy, yeah? Epilepsy. When the person gets epilepsy, he's completely out in the specific times, and it's known that the people who have it once keep on having it again down the line. And they fall again, it happens to them again, and they recover again, and it happens to them again, and recovers again. So therefore, that's when you have to do this bdika. But over here, this Shoichet, who went nuts 5 times in the last 25 years. And it's not specific times, it's not the itim kavua that it comes and it goes. But it could flare up one day.
It's a different type of shtus?
Yeah. First, but that we're going to get to later about a different type of shtus. The first point is that by a nichbe, by epilepsy, you know it's going to come back. And you know that when he recovers, it's a recovery which is only timed, because it's going to be another episode. But over here he says this sheikhet who lost it, who went nuts, sometimes it comes, but when it goes, he's totally back to being normal. So why should you be chayshish for it? You don't have to do the bdike, that it says in Reish Lamed Hey, that you have to be medaktik hate of maybe at each shchita you have to be medaktik, maybe he lost it at that point. Yeah, that's how he explains in Sif Alf. Sif Beis, Ois Beis, that's what it goes exactly the opposite. Maybe fakert. When the Rambam is talking about a chayli, maybe by kurdaikus, which is the example of the itim cholam, itim sheitim, or the mishach kurdaikus. Over there, it's talking about a shaita that doesn't completely lose the ability to talk. He's still able to talk. He's not mutal ke'evan. By epilepsy, he's mutal ke'evan. So maybe you can't really compare. You can't say maybe we still have a problem. Dafke by a chayli of being a שוטה, when he's itim chalim itim שוטה, dafke you do need a bdika. So he leaves that like that in ice base. Comes to ice gimel, and the Tzemach Tzedek says, okay, so maybe midin itim chalim itim שוטה v'chay shemishpat siman reish lamed hey, you don't have to be machmer. Why? Because you don't know when it's going to come. You don't have to expect it. But it happened to him 4 or 5 times. You didn't, so it's more than 3. So there's a chazaka.
I don't understand. If he's munach evan, completely out, what's the svara that by mechira you always have to check? Why would you even take?
No, he says that's what he says fakert. He says maybe by mechira fakert. It's not kemunach kevan. He says by mechira it's talking. First svara is maybe it's nichpe. That means that it comes and it that you know that it's going to return. The second one says maybe punkt fakert. By nichpe it's not a problem because when he starts going, he's gone completely. So when do you have to check? Not by nichpe. Maybe Reish Lamed is talking about kurdaikos lamashal.
No, but we say it's told that the halacha is that we assume we don't assume that you sold it.
You have to check it. Right. Yeah. So he says, but maybe nichpe is a chiddush. Even by nichpe you don't do it because you munach kevin. But by kurdaikos for sure you have to check it because because to him he seems normal, somewhat. You just don't know. But the maskana is that no. He says not maskana. No, his base. He says that there's no reason to be machmer between itim chalim itim שוטה when you don't know when it's going to come. But over here, you have a shayla. Maybe he's huchzak, and he's huchzak, and therefore we have to be worried. Maybe at any moment, this chayli is going to return to him. And therefore, maybe you have to check up on him the whole time to make sure that he didn't lose it, that he's not shechting while he lost it. And he brings the Rabbeinu Yerucham in the name of the Rameh, that if you don't know the time clearly, then it's a suffix שוטה. So if over here, the Rabbeinu Yerucham over here in the גיטין, in the Kuf of Aleph, and therefore, by itim chalim itim שוטה, by this guy, it becomes a suffix שוטה. If it's a suffix שוטה, everyone with shchitas becomes a shayla. And on the svara of Rabbeinu Yerucham, the Tzemach Tzedek is a pasha to it. It's a simple thing that if ein yodim zmanoi, that he's a suffix שוטה. But he says no. But maybe we follow the shit of Rabbeinu Shimshon Mishantz that the Beis Yosef brings in Kuf Chavtes. That over there he brings the lashon of veses. And the Taz says that Veses is Dafka. That it has to be specific times between them, like by a Veses. And over here by this Sheikhet, you don't have specific times between the Veses. And even 3 times which are not Shavim, because you had one time 10 years, one time 10 years, and then a few other times, it's still enough, it's still not enough to make it a Chazaka, you should be Chayshish. Because we're going to use that Taz, that Lashon Veses is Dafka, to say that the sheikhet should still be kosher. But the Tzemach Tzedek says you can't use the Taz over here. Why? Because what's the reason why the Taz says that? The Taz concludes and says you don't have to be machmir because it's a chumra b'divrei seifrim by a woman. Isha שוטה, it's a chumra b'divrei seifrim. So that's why we go to the extreme to say that that you need veses. But over here, shchita is yisud deraisa. The sheikhet is not a kosher sheikhet. You have a shayla b'yisud deraisa. Maybe you should be machmer. Maybe you don't need the veses kavua just like by Hilchos Nida. And you still should be chayshish. And even though the chashash is midrabanan, this is an important distinction of Tzemach Tzedek. The chashash is midrabanan, but the issur that's going to come out of it is deraisa. By a isha שוטה, the chashash is derabanan, and the issue is derabanan. The gzeir is only derabanan. By shchita, the chashash is taka derabanan. Maybe he's itim chalim, maybe he's going to lose it. But the issur that comes out of it is issur deraisa. If he doesn't shecht, if the person shechts and didn't shecht properly, issur nevela is issur treifa. If the nevela, then it's a problem deraisa. So he says maybe we do have to check. And Ois Daled, he says another thing. Even though he continues on this Kav of Vestus. And he says Nida is different. You can't use, he says by Nida we have Chashash is Derabanan, but the Isser is Deraisa, right? So the Chayra, that could be used as a Raya, that when you have a Chashash Deraisa, if they were Chayshish, and we're Isa, we're Machmer, by Vestus, by Nidas. So therefore, L'chayr over here by a Sheikhet, and I add to it also the same thing with L'chayr apply by a Get, we should be Chayshish because the Chashash is a Deraisa. So he says, no, he says that by Nidas, it's not because it's a Chashash Deraisa, so the Isser is Deraisa, the background Isser is Deraisa. It's over there because it doesn't make sense to say, it's neged achush to say that a woman will never become tameh. Talking about the din of Rasa b'Shaferet, I'm not going to get into it now. But by Cheskas Sheit, it's punkt verkehrt. Because the Cheskas, the Chazak of the Welt, of the Olam, the majority of the world is not Shaitim. So by Nid, when you have a Chazak of 3 times, together with the concept that this woman and most women are going to become Nidas down the line, we're Machmer by a Deraisa, when the background is Deraisa, we're Machmer by a Chashash Derabanan, even when the Vestas are not exactly the same. But over here, it's not Davar Kavua. Over here, it's not because it's Isur Deraisa. Over here, the only issue you have is the background of the Isur Deraisa. But it's not the Davar Kavua. It's not something that every person is going to. The majority of the world is not going to go nuts. The majority of the women will become Nidas. So that's why by there, we're Machmer. Over here, we're not Machmer. Ois Hey, the Tzemach Tzedek continues. That really, according to the Taz, until now we thought that the reason why the Taz says that it's anyways only with Divrei Seifrim, that's what the Taz concludes, is because the Taz was only make on Divrei Seifrim. Tzemach Tzedek says no. That's not the reason why the Taz throws the comment of the Rabbanon. That doesn't mean that the Taz says that if it would be a Deraisa, I wouldn't be worried about it. If it would be a Deraisa, I wouldn't be Meiko. No. Over here, by Isha שוטה and Kufi Tes, what Taz is talking about, we have a very big problem. The problem is, if she's Itim Chalim, Itim שוטה, we have a problem that she might go back to being a שוטה, and she might take fall into Znus. She might take be Einidas Lishma Satzma during that time. So therefore, the only head that I have is because the Chashash Znus is the Rabbanon. That means the Taz tells you, if it would not be because of this, I would be Machmer. Because of the scenario of this case, because when the woman is going to go back to being a שוטה, if the Chashash Znus over here, the Hefker, would be a Isur Deraisa, the Taz would be Machmer. Not because it's a Deraisa. Fakert, nothing to do with the Rabbanon Deraisa. He would be Machmer because it's something which is bound to happen. She's Itim Chalim, Itim שוטה, she's bound to go back to it. She might go back to it. And therefore we have a problem. But over here you don't have that. That's why he says, he says, no. B'etzem it's only Chashash Derabanan. If it's only Chashash Derabanan, the fact that we have a suffix that she might go back to that situation is not enough for us to say that it's also. And that's why he says when she has a vessus of going back and forth, and she has exactly specific times, so now she's already muchzak as a שוטה. She's muchzak as she's going to go back to it. And that's why we are machmer. But if she's not muchzak to it, we could rely on the fact that it's a Isur Rabbanon and say, no, if it happens again, it's a suffix if it's going to happen. If it happens, because she doesn't have a vessus, if it's a suffix if it's going to happen again, it's fine. But if it's a different Isur, which is not this Isur of the Chashash Znus that we are worried about, maybe, even if it's a Chashash Deraisa, right now there's no Isur Deraisa at all. L'kuli alma. Because being worried about a Chashash Deraisa is only a Chashash Derabanan. Deraisa is only vadai. The din that you have to be choishish is derabanan. So when by the din of znus, we're choishish because the choishish miderabanan. And the background is the Rabban. If the background is Midiraisa, would have a big problem. Over here, the Chashash is not, even though the Isur, the background Isur is Midiraisa, right now, there is no Isur Deraisa. And when a Shoichet is Shoichet, when he's fully healthy, when he's Chalim, and we paskin that is a Pikech Legamre, there is no Isur Torah whatsoever. There's no Chashash that when he's going to become a Shoita, he's going to Shecht and we're not going to know. That's not the chashash. So therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek goes even further. When it comes to shchita, even if it was a Isur Torah, we had the chashash because maybe it's a Isur Torah, and it's zmanim kvuim, it's a zman kavua that we know when he's going to lose it, he still wouldn't be more than a derabanan. Or the most will be a chashash derabanan that we're chayshish that he's going to go back to become a shaitan, and at that point do Isur Deraisa. And for sure, when he's not tuchzak with zman kvuim, like in this case, there's bichlal no chazak, and you should be mekel completely. And Ois Vavi continues, and Tzemach Tzedek then says that you have a problem with it, because by a woman who is a shaita, what's the reason why we were oiser itim chalim? Because it's something which is mesudar, it comes at specific times and we know it's going to come back. That means that even when she's healthy, she still has in her the roots and what's going to bring out the sickness. And you know it's going to pop out. So therefore, we're chayshish. And when a person is stam crazy, when she's completely healthy, we're going to say there's no zecher left of it, and therefore you're allowed to divorce her, unless you have specific time frames that prove that it's going to come back out. If you have specific time frames that prove that it's going to come back out, then it falls into the same category as a nichpeh, and by itim chalim, by a woman that you know is going to like a veses, and you should be worried about it. And therefore, if it's not kavua, and you don't have specific times, even though it's shayach, that it's going to pop out again, it's still not shayach to say that it's usher now, because now she's fully healthy. And it's not because of itim chalim. It means, in other words, what he's explaining now is the svara of the Taz, why by itim chalim that does not have a veses kavua, where mater is not because she's itim chalim and right now she's a pikeach. It's because since she does not have a veses for craziness, and therefore we don't know if it's ever going to pop back out again, mashenkin by a choyli kavua. Therefore, right now she's not a itim chalim; she's completely chalim. No, so in the veses you have to be careful with it. But he says that the lashon that he says the lashon of when it's a problem is when it's a veses. He says, but that's only in the halachas of a get, because over there she's completely chalim. We say she's completely chalim. She's not itim chalim, and that's why the Taz is mekel when there's no veses. But over here, when it comes what in Choshen Mishpat and Siman Reish Lamed Hey, that over there we say that we are chayshish and you need bdika. Maybe by a shchita you also need bdika. So therefore, maybe the reason of the Taz was not because itim chalim itim sheita completely b'keach, but because specifically b'keach now. But still, even if she is completely pikeach now, being that we have a chashash that maybe he's going to go back to it, maybe we should be boidik on this sheichet, that maybe he's going to lose it, just like we're boidik when it comes to mekach umamker and simulation lamed hey. So Tzemach Tzedek says no, follow the reason. What's the reason why the Taz is Mekel when there's no Veses? It's not because of this din special chidush that she's fully Chalim versus Itim Chalim. And it's simply, the Chashash is because we're Choshesh that we noig with her Minag Hefker. And when we have a chashash, we're going to be noig minag hefker. We don't care if we say that the sickness is hidden inside and it's going to pop out, or we say the sickness completely left, or the sickness completely left, that's for sure coming back. That whole discussion is irrelevant. It's not a gzeras hakosov. It's a svara. It's a reason. The reason is because we're worried that chashash we're noig minag hefker. And still, the halacha is if she does not have a vesa, so we're not worried that maybe she's going to become שוטה again. So therefore, when she's a pikachas, you can give her a get. The only time we don't do it is when she's muhzak in a way that she has a vessel that we know for sure is going to come back. But if we don't know for sure it's going to come back, then we don't have to worry about it, b'chlal. If you know that there's a chazak is for sure is going to come back, then this chashash derabbanan wakes up again. Those nos. And if they were not choshesh when there's no vessels, when it comes to such a big issur like issur's nose, for sure over here you should not be choishish. But the Tzemach Tzedek says still no. The fact that the Taz compares it to vestis of nida is a big problem. Why? Because in vestis of nida there are certain cases when even if the zmanim are not kavua, we're still choishish. Like Tana Sherasa, for example. So therefore, why did the Taz take as a complete approach that Veses would mean obviously Zmanim Kvuim, that you know exactly how long between each time, is 3 times with exactly the same intervals between them. There are cases in Hilchos Nida when we're Choshesh to Vestes, which are not exactly the same exact Vestes. So the Tzemach Tzedek now goes back to what we said before about Nida. That Nida is a special din. Ektana Sherasa is going to become a Gdela. When she becomes a Gdela, she's for sure going to see. That's the majority of women see. They become Nidas. And therefore, we put on her now the Chazakeh based on the future. Something is for sure, Davar Vada is going to come in the future. But when it comes to Shchita, and when it comes to a woman who's getting divorced, and same thing by a man who's giving a get, the chazakah of most people is that they're briim and not shaitim. And that's why he says that for this you need a regular veses. Because the veses she'ena kavua that we're relying on by Isha Sheras of a is only because we know for sure she's going to become tameh down the line. And if you stam have a shvache chazakah, you can't take somebody out from a cheskas da'alma. And in Ois Ches, he proves it from the din of Reya Machmas Tashmish. Because the din of Reya Machmas Tashmish, if she sees 3 times, but it's not Ritzufim, she doesn't have to take a get. Why is that? Because the majority of women are not Reya Machmas Tashmish. The majority of women are not Reya Machmas Tashmish. So this is not enough of a chazakah, it's a chazakah klusha. It's not enough of a chazakah to say that you should be choishish when there's no specific veses. And that's a proof to what we say over here in this one, that when it comes to a sheikhet, and the same thing would apply to a woman receiving a get, if there is no veses kavua to becoming a sheitah, so then you don't have, being that it's not it's not something which is standard, it's not something which is common, we don't use a chazakah klusha of 3 times, which are not exactly with the same exact intervals between them, to make somebody aser. Why? Because it's not Roiv Nashim, and Kavua and Roiv are the opposite of it. Only when you have a scenario when you know that the woman is going to see Bevados, that's when we say that even if the 3 times is not exactly with the same interval, we still Chayshish. Over here we're not Chayshish to it. Then he continues in Ois Tes, Tzemach Tzedek says that even if you want to go with the Chashash and Siman Reish Lamed Hey, that you have to check to make sure that the person didn't lose it, it's anyways only a chashash medivre seifrim. And therefore, when you have a second suffix, the 2 sfekas together are fine. What's the other suffix? We have over here not stam another suffix. We have here a sfek by a sheikhet. First suffix, maybe he's going to lose it in the middle of shchita. Second suffix, even if he's going to lose it, maybe they're going to realize right away. And even more so, could be that even when he's in the beginning of being a שוטה, he still shechs properly, because he's still in the middle. So over here, even though it's a chashash deraisa, because kol behema is becheskas asura when she's alive, is still, the two sfekas that we have over here is still enough to be matir. And now the Tzemach Tzedek comes and says something else. Till now we understood that someone who begins to become a שוטה becomes a shayla. He says, no, that's only choshe mishpat. Because over there you have to make sure the person is fully understands what he's doing when he signs it. This matches what we discussed the other Tzemach Tzedek about choshe mishpat. But when it comes to a sheichet, and when it comes to a get, when the person starts to lose it, he's not fully considered a שוטה deraisa, the full שוטה she'amru Chazal, that he loses it. Elamai, if you know for sure he started losing it, then maybe it's a shayla. And he says the last point that Tzemach Tzedek brings in Ois Yud is, ultimately, being that there was a big gap between them, so even if you're going to paskin like the Taz, even if you're not going to paskin like the Taz, that you don't need 3 times, but the paskin that you need, that even with 3 unconnected times, that's not like a vessel, so you still consider the shayla of a שוטה. Ultimately, at least one thing we could learn from a vessel is you could be oiker of vessels. So if enough time passed afterwards, and the person did not go back to being nuts, that's already, he says, a full year is for sure considered akira. And that's all in Hilchis Shchita. If you look in Shal Tzemach Tzedek and Even Ezer Siman Gimel, over there, where Tzemach Tzedek is talking about allowing a man to marry Lisa Isha Alishter Chen Rabbeinu Gershom, or to give a get when she's Itim Cholim Itim שוטה, over there the Tzemach Tzedek takes the Taz a little bit differently than over here. But being that over there the Tzemach Tzedek wanted to be mekel when it comes to Chen Rabbeinu Gershom, so he said dafka not to pass like the Taz, and there's not enough time to get into it now. ועוד חזון למועד.